من اون خوردن ندارم، چی کنم؟
خب هر روز ما با سختی هست.
مرز خطر. مخاطبان روزنامه 8 صبح می توانند خبرهای افغانستان و جهان را از دامنه اینترنتی این روزنامه دریافت کنند. همچنان آدرس های روزنامه 8 صبح در فیسبوک، اینستاگرام، توییتر، یوتیوب، اسپاتیفای، اپل میوزیک، گوگل پادکست و تریدز، خبرهای تازه، گزارش‌های ویژه، مستندهای کوتاه و تحلیل‌ها را در قالب پادکست و مخاطبان ارائه می‌کند. رویدادها بر سرنوشت شما تأثیر می‌گذارند. آنچه را می‌بینید و آنچه را می‌دانید روایت کنید. 8 صبح
د 8 صبح واتس اپ چینل وڅارئ. موږ د افغانستان سیمې او نړۍ وروستي خبرونه معتبر، متوازن او پر وخت خبرو. د خبري پیښو، راپورونو او تحلیلونو ته د اسانه لاسرسي لپاره د 8 صبح واتس اپ چینل وڅارئ او خپور کړئ.
کانال تلگرام 8 صبح را دنبال کنید. ما تازه ترین رویدادهای خبری افغانستان، منطقه و جهان را به گونه موثق، متوازن و با موقع پوشش می دهیم. برای دسترسی آسان به رویدادهای خبری، گزارش‌ها و تحلیل‌ها، کانال 8 صبح را در تلگرام دنبال کنید و به اشتراک بگذارید.
هشت صبح دریچه خبر افغانستان.
انگلستان، سفیر صاحب سید طیب جواد، سفیر پیشین افغانستان در انگلستان و امریکا، خانم آشیتا میتل، نماینده منطقه‌ای آسیای مرکزی دفتر مبارزه با جرایم مواد مخدر سازمان ملل متحد از ازبکستان، دکتر ولادیمیر اوسیف، رئیس مؤسسه CIS از روسیه، جنرال صاحب اسد دورانی، رئیس پیشین ISI از پاکستان، آقای نیکولاس کی، سفیر پیشین بریتانیا در افغانستان و خانم کرینا تیمسینا، امان کننده منطقه‌ای آسیای مرکزی در دفتر مبارزه با تروریسم در ملل متحد در امریکا.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. We've just had a very nice introduction. Thank you very much. That takes the weight off my plate anyway. I'm Lynn O'Donnell, a journalist, and the panel that you've just been introduced to are here to discuss Afghanistan within the parameters of regional consensus, global support. Two concepts I think it's fair enough to say have been in pretty short supply, or at least have presented a challenge over the past 2 years. Each of the panelists is an expert in their field, and it's a very varied panel that we have. So I'm looking forward to a very wide-ranging discussion. I'll make sure, even though we don't have very much time and our time is tightened, that we have time to take questions at the end of our discussion. So please feel free to participate. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to make a short presentation of their ideas along the theme that we've discussed. And we're going to start with Ambassador Jawad, who's going to talk about regional consensus and global support, where to start in the zero-sum milieu. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First and foremost, I would like to say thank you to my dear friends, Dr. Siruspantal, Dr. Muradian in the Afghan Institute for Strategic Studies to make this incredible forum possible in beautiful Tajikistan, and so glad to see my sisters and brothers from Tajikistan once again here. The topic of the discussion is regional consensus in global re-engagement, I will call it. So I'll focus on that issue. Is it possible to accomplish this under the current zero-sum game and increased tension in the region? And if it is possible, how to go about it, how to accomplish it. Well, first and foremost prerequisite for building or enhancing regional cooperation in hoping for re-engagement of the international community is to have a reliable, legitimate partner in Kabul. And this cannot be accomplished unless the regime in Kabul has national legitimacy. Without national legitimacy, it's not possible to have a government that's responsive and representative to be a partner to the international community. And therefore, without a constitutional setup, without rule of law, and without institutions that are legitimate institutions, the regime in Kabul will be tactical, it will be short-term, it will be ineffective to engage with the institutions or organizations that claim to be a state in Afghanistan. So, as we discussed yesterday, the first and foremost prerequisite to have national legitimacy to address critical issues such as gender apartheid, discriminatory approaches against most Afghan citizens to acquire the national legitimacy is the first step for international recognition in being a partner to the regional powers and international players. Of course, the second challenge is that we are living more and more in an atmosphere, in a milieu that the countries in the region are more divided because of the tension in Ukraine, because of the development in the Middle East. And peace and security in Afghanistan. Not only that, but also we have common threats in the region: terrorism, extremism, migration, refugee crisis, water shortage, water management, food insecurity that affects all of us in the region. So there's a lot of really common grounds to cooperate, in addition to the dreams that we have to have also a more common economic grounds to cooperate. That I'll leave it aside. This was a wish, and it is still a wish, and hopefully will happen, but that will be secondary. And just in the past 2 years, having served in London and Moscow, we are noticing that many countries in the greater region, including United States and others, are learning that a policy of relying on one Islamic extremist or terrorist group to fight another jihadi group is ineffective, is useless. That was my point when I was ambassador to Moscow, making to my Russian friends that this is impossible, that to expect a terrorist, Islamic jihadi group to take a stand against another jihadi group to do a favor to Moscow or Washington. This is unrealistic. So in this atmosphere, when the hope for change of behavior of Taliban are proving to be too optimistic, there is more reason for the countries in the region to engage more, to facilitate forums like this, for the Afghans to debate and to start thinking and developing alternatives. And in this aspect, I'm really grateful to Tajikistan, but also to Russia for the change of position and policy recently. These are good, welcoming signs for the countries of the region to start thinking about a new roadmap for a future of security and safety in Afghanistan. Recent UN report is big time in the media and other. UN role is always welcome in Afghanistan, but not as a substitute for less engagement of United States and other countries, particularly EU and others. That will be successful only if it's supported properly by the US and other countries. And US role is still actually key in Afghanistan, but honestly, it's unrealistic to think that US will have a more assertive role in Afghanistan because of the elections in the United States and the domestic priorities that exist in Afghanistan. It's equally unrealistic, and I hear a lot from my colleagues to ask the Afghans, you have to do it yourself. The Afghans should get together, Afghans should find a solution. It's unfair for the international community to tell us Afghans that the Taliban does not meet our requirement for recognition. But you Afghans, you go talk to them and work with them. This is a double standard. If they don't meet your standards, then why Afghan standards should be lower? And even if the Afghan standards are lower, we have very good politicians in Afghanistan. My former boss, President Karzai, Dr. Abdullah, they are there. They're trying very hard to do something effectively. No one listened to them. So it's not like the Afghans are not willing to engage. There's no return for this kind of engagement. And about Russia, I think it's good to see that Russians are less romantic about Taliban and more pragmatic. And this is a welcoming step forward. China is still very selectively engaged, and hopefully, actually, I think they will be better served if they become a willing partner in the process in Afghanistan. I'll try to keep the time constraint. So I'll come to the second part of the question, is building global consensus. That's key. And I think under the current situation, as I mentioned about the role of United States, Russia, and other, here the 4 specific steps that could be taken will be effective. The first one is to convene a large format UN-led forum, as hopefully as there was one done actually in May of last year, to create actually more unity and give a more clear message to Taliban and Afghans that are looking to usually to US, UN, and other for a sense of direction. And also more regularly scheduling SRAP meetings, to special representative meetings, to follow up on the bigger forums. And the third, I'll be brief, I can discuss it later if there is time. The third step that could be taken is to establish a contact group to interlink actually the initiative in Moscow and in Turkey and hopefully in Iran and other places with the international efforts. And to have a continuity and also a modem, a forum of better communicating with Afghans who are not part of the setup in Kabul. And fourth, and the last point is to appoint a high-profile UN representative to lead these efforts more effectively and facilitate more contact with the Afghans. To conclude, I would like to say that there's the key elements of national legitimacy, responsive governance, regional cooperation, and international cooperation are interlinked. And we can accomplish actually a future of stability and find a solution for governance and security in Afghanistan if we work on all of them simultaneously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think there's a lot to unpack from the Ambassador's presentation, so I hope you'll cogitate on what questions you can present to him for a forward-going process, really, is what you've proposed. Ashita Mittal is our next panelist. She's the Central Asia Director of the UN's Office on Drugs and Crime. She was with the UNODC in Afghanistan between 2009 and 2014 and has been based in Tashkent since then. I think it's fair to say you've been at the coalface of Taliban financing efforts, probably nothing that you haven't seen. And the recent report that was released by the UNODC came in for a lot of flack about its accuracy. It didn't quite dovetail into the preferred international narrative on the Taliban's approach to drugs. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say about the picture there. Thanks, Ashita.
Thank you, Lynn, and big thank you to the Herat Security Dialogue, because I really think that keeping Afghanistan on the map of global conversations is extremely important. As a person who served in Afghanistan, and also this person who serves in the Central Asia region, I could not agree with you more that we need regional consensus and global support. Drugs, crime, terrorism, and corruption are issues that find their way through the weakest spots. They are like the water that flows through different channels. Yes, we have a recent report that was developed. Our purpose and objective of the report is to capture through evidence, which is the satellite images, and it really shows that opium poppy cultivation in Afghanistan plunged from by an estimated 95% following a drug ban imposed by the de facto government and authorities, and from 233,000 hectares to 10,800 hectares in 2023. A picture does not lie. This is the reality. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about what does it mean. It led to a drop in supply of opium from 6,200 tons in 2022 to 333 tons in 2023. The sharp reduction has immediate humanitarian impact, and we should not forget it. The poppy cultivation actually serves in almost a third of the villages in Afghanistan. It generates more than 100,000 full-time jobs, but also provides succor to almost 200,000 families in this. The incomes that have dropped for the farmers have acute humanitarian impact on everyday lives of farmers. We are dealing with an issue which is not only about drugs. Drugs is an equalizer. When it finds its way into our homes, it has direct impact on real lives. In Afghanistan, there are nearly 3 to 4 million drug users who are also affected by it. And I believe that the harmful impact in the drop of the poppy cultivation and the drop in the heroin is also being compensated with increased presence of methamphetamines that have grown multifold. The data from seizures from not only the region shows that between 2017 and 2023, there's a 12-fold increase in methamphetamine seizures in the region. It means that the drug traffickers are looking at basically managing and reshaping the illicit drug markets. We are finding fentanyl and other drugs that are actually finding their ways. Today, it's not just the land borders, but you have also the cyber crimes and illicit drug markets operating out of on the internet. And they're finding their ways, and they're finding new ways to traffic these substances. Let me say the regional coordination is an essence of how to deal with it. I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but just to say it is impacting real lives in and around Afghanistan. When the de facto government took over, we thought what to do now. We do have an office in Afghanistan that continues to work because we work on alternative development. We also work on health issues. But the most important thing was to actually develop what we call the security stability grid, which is really looking at working around the region by strengthening cross-border cooperation to also make sure that we support the countries, whether it's the Central Asian countries that share 2,600 kilometers of borders with Afghanistan, but also Iran and Pakistan. Iran makes the maximum seizures in the region. Just to mention that while there's a drop in the production, the seizure data from the region really show that in Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, the seizures have doubled up. We used to never see the amounts that we see through. So what is happening is because of the change in prices in Afghanistan, I know Lynn people criticize this, but I can just say we need this data to be more evidence informed. The prices from before the ban was around $106 per kg, but today in the spring and beyond, you can see it as the global highest. It's around almost like $700 per kg, which is a very huge price. So the marketers are actually collecting the opium from the farmers, but they save it and they are playing the global market. So actually, the net providers are really the net drivers are really the traffickers, and the profits are made outside of Afghanistan, not only in Afghanistan. A kg may cost us $700 in Afghanistan, but in the streets of London, it's more than $50,000 per kg. And we're not even talking about value additions. And nobody answers the questions to Afghanistan, where are the precursor chemicals coming in from? So basically, if we want to really look at drugs, crime, and terrorism, we need to basically make sure we look at a bigger picture. And yes, we can continue to argue on the data, but data is never perfect. We can only try as a UN to provide the best opportunities that we can. I want to say that post-COVID-19, it is very, very clear for the countries in the region, you need the connectivity. You need to build human capital in Afghanistan. You need to look at sustainable development and investing in illicit economies. If you do not invest in illicit economies, dependence on illicit economies will increase, including on small arms, trafficking in small arms, light weapons, and also human trafficking and multiple issues. We are committed as a UN. We have also established what we call border liaison officers across the region. We've got container control programs. We've got strengthening the border outposts across the region. But most importantly, I think drugs, crime, terrorism, and corruption are issues that really impact young people. Engagement of youth in creating what I call a culture of lawfulness, of integrity, of justice is extremely important. I want to mention what Dr. Santa said, that, sustainable development cannot take place without rule of law. And rule of law cannot take place without human rights. And you need to create hope, especially amongst the youth in this region, wider region of Central Asia, Afghanistan, and region. 60% of the young population is of below the age of 30 years. And if they don't have the hope on security in the sustainable development and rule of law, we will continue to have the threats that we see around. Today, this region is sandwiched between multiple conflicts, and it is extremely important that we continue to place the issues of drugs, crime, and terrorism and corruption. Money, illicit financial flows. This is an economy in the northern route itself for nearly $2 billion. And this is the money that will flow into supporting those who want to, stir more conflicts in the world. I quote our famous, poet, a writer who is common to this entire region, Alistair Navoy. He said, the biggest enemy for the world, human beings, is animosity. And the biggest plea and credit and the supporter is amity. So I really think bringing people together, bringing also women into the conversations on drugs, crime, terrorism is extremely important. And for us, there is no indivisibility of these factors. And I believe that if you want to really go forward, we need to come together. If you want to go fast, yes, you can find quick solutions by yourself. But unless and until we don't work together and stop looking at fragmented only numbers, but look at putting the people of Afghanistan in the center of the response, because we need to be accountable to 41 million people who are in Afghanistan, but also the population that is being displaced around the world. What is their future? But also, they are important interlocutors in both the intellectual and also development factors across the world. So let's look at putting people first and looking at a development canvas in which the issues of drugs, crime, and terrorism not looked at only from the perspective of security, but actually on peace and development. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Ashita. Our next panelist is Dr. Vladimir Siv. He's been deeply embedded in the Russian defense infrastructure for quite some time. You're going to speak to us about the regional security profile. Please, yours is the floor for the next 5 to 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. Dear Chairman, dear guests, it was very nice to me to take part in this very interesting meeting. I left school in Tajik Republic in New York City 1981, and I cannot visit Dushanbe 41 years, so it is a good idea from the Afghan Institute for Strategic Studies that I may to visit Dushanbe next time for a long time. I met with General Durrani from Pakistan, not only in Moscow. We will be speaking in Herat, maybe more than 10 years ago, and speaking about situation very changing for that time. I want to show for us Russian position on Afghanistan and compare with American position. When I left my school in Tajik Republic, Russian troops stay in Afghanistan. Now, after then, American troops go to Afghanistan and go away. And historically, we may speak about Great Britain, the military presence. It was didn't what effective. And if look into Russian position on Afghanistan, I fully agree with my colleague, former ambassador, Afghan ambassador in Russia, that it is pragmatic, and For a long time, Russia tried to solve anywhere, not only in Afghanistan, only with official level. No, for example, look into Turkey. In Turkey, Russia tried to working only with private party, not working with opposition. This is more typical. If come back to Afghanistan, we try to speak in not only from ruled party in Afghanistan with Taliban, we try to work with opposition too, no, as well as with Ahmad Shah Massoud, for example. Do you know about recently visit Moscow, this man 2 times this year? It is typical situation for the United States. No, for example, you know that the United States working very often with Taliban 1990s. The time Russia cannot working with Taliban. After then, United States working with Taliban during President Karzai, President Ghani, and we know about a lot of meetings in Doha, for example, Qatar, and of course, United States go away from this Afghanistan. But recently in Moscow, one of representative of Afghan opposition speaking that the United States cannot go away from the Afghanistan and speak about have not only military object, have the object from the CIA on the territory of the Afghanistan. It is not my view, it is view of one of representative of Afghan opposition. So every side, Taliban, for example, United States, Russia, have a different interests. And we national interests and try realize them in this situation that we have now. At first, I'm military expert. In my personal view, now Taliban have strong position in the country. It is unrealistic speaking that any opposition may forces change in Taliban in the near future. I don't believe. So not only Russia, but United States saying cannot to base on opposition, because if opposition may be control a part of Afghanistan, of course, but this opposition cannot control this a part of Afghanistan. Opposition cannot to change Taliban. So the United States, the West, the Russian Federation, and the regional countries working with official Taliban. No, for example, at first with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Amir Muttaqi. What is a different position, a different view, the United States and Russian Federation, how to solve problem on Afghanistan? No, United States first spent a lot of time for military solution. Military solution cannot to find. Now try to using another opportunities, at first using financial tools, influence to Taliban, have limited presence, as well as military presence or territory of Afghanistan. Try to help in not only Taliban, but opposition too. But at first, United States bases on extra-regional countries. It is typical position of the United States. What to do Russian Federation? Russian Federation bases on regional countries. You know that in 2017, we created a Moscow format consultation on Afghanistan. And that time was including 11 countries. What is countries? Russia, Afghanistan, China, India, Iran, Pakistan, and 5 countries from the Central Asia, 11 countries. Of course, we sometimes haven't 1 year meeting. Now we have in Kazan, on this 29th of September this year, 5th meeting. So from 2017 to 2023, we have only 5 meetings. It is not huge, but at the same time, Russia continues this dialogue. And now we try to choose another places for continued dialogue. It is not Moscow, in Kazan. Of course, it is Moscow format, but in Kazan. Why? Tatarstan is a very important a part of Russian Federation because in this country live a lot of Muslims. Muslims, it is Sunni Muslims. It is not majority, not radical majority. So it was country very active and try to develop an political economic cooperation with Afghanistan. No, you know about creating in Afghanistan Russian business center. Now this working 3 months. 3 months. It is initiative to create the center was from Tatarstan. And you know that in the meeting in the Kazan, president of Tatarstan will be chairman, open this meeting. So during this meeting, what is dynamic Moscow format consultation? At first we have only 11 countries, but now we invited additional 4 countries: Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Turkey. 4 countries. At first, we try to speak in special envoys. Special envoys, no, for example, from Russian side, Kabulov, but from other countries, we at first try to invite people like level special envoys, and no, for example, from Beijing, for example, was special from other countries. This interesting in Kazan was important because we may understand what really situation with solution of Afghan crisis. Looking, only one country, this Tajik Republic cannot full support Kazan declaration. It was 2 reasons. First, from Tajik side, it is impossible to support this declaration because we speaking positive about Taliban. At first, speaking about positive to take war with Islamic State or Daesh. Second, it is drugs. But from Tajik Republic is try to have more strong position against Taliban. You know that when Taliban catch authorities, Tajik side tried to help in opposition, different helping. And after then, some people from Tajik opposition live in this republic. So Tajik Republic, but I understand it, why the Dushanbe takes same position. No, you know that in Afghanistan live a lot of Tajik national people. So we have different estimates how much. Some people think maybe 30%, for example, those a lot for population Tajik. Of course, it is Tajik, not same in Afghan and, for example, Tajik. No, I made to compare, for example, people from Azerbaijan in Iran and Azerbaijan. It is different people, same different Tajik and Afghanistan and Tajik Republic. No, maybe this maybe only my personal view. People from Afghanistan may be more radical. You know that now from government of Taliban have one of representatives from Tajik, but it's radical Tajik speaking really. But it is of course, but at the same time, for Tajik government, it is important have more stronger position because it is wanted to support Tajik that live on this afterboard in Tajik Republic. Different position of Uzbek Republic. Uzbek Republic officials speaking about all economy projects. You know about, for example, creating a railroad to Mazar-e Sharif, and I don't know what we would different direction, but it is a good step for using transit potential of Afghanistan. And a lot of Uzbek live on Afghan territory too, but at the same time, we maybe understand the position this General Dostum, for example. No, it is criticized a lot what is really to do General Dostum. But maybe President Emoli Rahmon more time spent for support Tajik than maybe that Uzbek government. No, maybe. But at the same time, we have different passes how to support support people that we live in Afghanistan. But of course, I agree that what is the real achievements of Taliban for 2 years? It is not civil war. Because when only Taliban catch authorities, lots of people think that will begin war between the different nationals, between Uzbek, Tajik, and Pushtun, for example. Now, not civil war. It is very serious achievements. Of course, maybe we may different speaking what really achievements if about take war with Al Qaeda. No, I don't know. And with Islamic State, no, from official side, Mutaki speaks that we have achievements with limited Islamic State. No, in my view, maybe same situation, but not changed. But it is an interesting position of
Doctor.
Yes. I understand you. No, the interesting position, the collective security threat organization. For a long time, this organization speak about threat from Afghanistan. Threat very serious. Speaking about how much people is ready to attack a Tajik Republic, for example. Now we soft position. So not threat, maybe challenge. Okay. Of course, but because I have few time, I will speak in a few about visit to Moscow.
Maybe we can come back to that.
Maybe reply to question, no problem.
Yeah, is that okay with
Reply
you?
question. Okay,
Right.
okay. If it will be interesting, I may be speaking. Okay, thank you very much. So in my view, Russia, conclusion, Russia cannot solve an Afghan crisis himself, unrealistic. United States too. Russia tried to using regional countries for solving this problem, for not destabilization of Afghanistan. Because for us, destabilization of Afghanistan, very huge problem. Refugees and others, extremism. So for us, it is very, very important. United States is far, but we is near. A lot of people from Central Asia go go to Russian Federation, like find a job, for example. So for us, it is important.
Okay.
Unfortunately, now we cannot cooperate with the West. It is problem. I hope maybe in the future situation changing. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Very comprehensive, and I'm sure there will be some more questions about the regional security landscape. Thank you. Our next panelist is General Asad Durrani, a former head of the ISI. And General, you told me that after the withdrawal of the former Soviet Union forces from Afghanistan in 1989, it was your job to put the Humpty Dumpty, as you put it, back together, but that you failed spectacularly. I wonder if there are any successes that you can tell us about in the next 5 minutes. Yeah, thanks.
You know, almost every speaker from this pedestal started by thanking the Institute and Dr. Muradian. I have a special reason to be grateful to Professor Shpanta's team. They've been inviting me for a long, long time, twice in Herat and now second time here. And that despite the fact that they have a fairly good idea that my views are not in sync or not exactly in sync with the general ambience of the crowd. So that is one reason that I am very grateful. You do let people say what they feel like. On the other hand, you don't mind if I narrate an incident, 2014, a very high-profile conference on Afghanistan taking place in Oxford, sponsored by the prestigious Dishley Foundation. And when there I said, 2014, America's project Afghanistan has bombed. I think they were almost going to charge me for sponsoring terrorism. Luckily, Barney Rubin, who deal with Afghanistan must know him, he said more or less the same thing, and that spared me a trip to Guantanamo Bay. The reason is simple. I come from an institution where we were taught, if you have to carry out an assessment, it better be hard-nosed, cold-blooded, no wish list, no use of unfortunately, and wish that would happen, nothing like that. Assessment has to be as it is. And the reason is, after you have given your views, it's up to the policymaker to come up with a policy. But you give your assessment. For me, making an assessment of a war in Afghanistan, not only because of historical reasons, because one could see that the Taliban were imposing upon the United States terms of war with which either they were not familiar, the opponents, the American or the NATO troops, or their strength had been neutralized. This is the, this is the art of warfare. What happens after that, and that is where our moderator has talked about, it's a little different. Before going to that particular time, when our efforts to put the so-called Afghan empty together again failed, I have to also talk about a couple of things that happened in this conference only yesterday. Some very good people were passionately pleading for the international community to come and help them, help the women, help hold the Taliban accountable for the money that they are getting, etc. I didn't have the heart to tell them, don't hold your breath. No one is coming. Last year, the message, I suppose, right here in this room was so clear. We are away. Our job is done. It's now up to you. If you think you can manage it, go ahead. Otherwise, find a way. I'm missing Master Newman this time. He made it very clear. Afghanistan is off our radar. If it is, I'll tell you why it is. If that be the case, then don't wait for them. There will be other reasons, other ways of taking care of certain things, but not the, if there is such a beast as international community, is not coming here. Same holds true for regional consensus. It has never worked. After the Soviet withdrawal, we toyed with very many different combinations, 4+2 and 5+0 and all sorts of things, the neighbors plus the superpower and Pakistan somewhere thrown in. Never heard that anything happened. I don't think most of them ever met. And if they did, if they came up with something substantial, I'm not aware. But there is one development about which I am reasonably aware. 20 years of the NATO occupation of Afghanistan. And as my colleague here has said, there are countries here which had interest in, seeing off the occupation, and then they had an understanding, Pakistan, Iran, Russia, China, Central Asian countries, and possibly Turkey, that after that we'll try and build this country, help it bring it free. After the 15th August, I haven't heard about them. There's nothing to show for any joint effort. We're all there on our own. Pakistan had the biggest stake. If it did try to come and, do something, I do not know. But of all the atrocious things that we may have committed in the past, asking the Afghan refugees, pushing them back, has actually set back our own clout to do something with the Taliban. Set back by many years. I do not know how we are going to overcome this deficit. There are other countries who are doing it pretty well. They are reaching out individually to the Taliban because they are the new game in town. Iran was always very good, no doubt about that. China was working. Russians, I must say, they must. Indians have played their cards spectacularly well. They have reached out. They've always done that. That balancing game is one. They are doing that. They send their wheat. They've established their office. America, if it is coming back, if it is back, it is also inducting dollars. It's not for the Afghan people. Where you say that they'll come and ask them what it's worth. It is for Afghans. I think yesterday there is someone who was talking about the economic factor and said it's a bribe that they give to people. True, it has always been like this. You think the money that Pakistan used to receive went for the people? It bribed some people, it satisfied a few requirements, and it kept Pakistan on the leash. And just in case they had any idea, they had intentions of moving away from them, going over to China or something. So at least that was one thing that could be used to keep them there. So they don't do that. Right now, I think the American coming back, inducting dollar, because of which the Afghani is becoming stronger, is not meant for the people again. It is just to ensure that they have enough leverage with the government in Kabul, runs to Kabul, and to not to allow the Chinese free run in a very important place. It has to be countered in one way or the other. So that is what happens when you talk about regional consensus. Bilaterally, by all means, do whatever you can. Internally, people will find their own way. I mean, usually one either waits or carries out something if one can do that. The best under these circumstances is the engagement, and that I thought is the only thing that all these countries, regional countries that we're expecting, might even individually do. I think there are two developments that may still force us, despite my, this analysis in which I'm suggesting that it's not likely to happen. They may force us to bring Afghanistan on board. One is East-West divide has been on for a couple of years, China and United States. After the crisis in the Middle East, I think Jawad has mentioned about it, there is a huge North-South divide also in the world. That means the camps, the groups, the regions, the countries will probably be taking now or positioning themselves so that in this greater game, they have a reasonable chance to survive and not be trampled over by one superpower or the other. That may happen, but practically what is likely to, what is my recommendation coming from my background, if today any of our countries, India, Pakistan, or Iran, were to offer some help to the Taliban to fight Daesh, it's a common enemy of all three of us. It's quite possible that we can work together. Do not underestimate the capacity of the intelligence agencies to work together. Once they get together, they can actually bring about certain miracles that the others can't even think about. It's not because I've served there, I was only a recruit and in there. This is no great experience. But I know that they can work it. And the last point, well, just couldn't help, yesterday when people were talking about a black hole of Afghanistan. I say it's not a black hole. It's more like a Bermuda Triangle. It sucks in empires and the neighbors, but it also throws them out. Not in good shape, but reasonably they can come out. So that's what Afghanistan is. Just to finish on a lighter note, if possible, don't get involved. We in the neighborhood have no choice. We are there. We are perforce there, but we also have to tread very carefully when we deal with this God-forsaken or this God's own country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General. No one is coming. Regional consensus is impossible. One jihadi group can fight another, which is in direct contradiction to what Ambassador Jawad was saying. Thank you very much. I'm sure you'll get quite a few questions once we turn to the audience. But before then, it's the turn of Ambassador Nick Kay. You've been an ambassador in multiple guises, and I know you'll have your own message on the way forward, which dovetails with the panel's theme of regional consensus, global support. I'll also be very keen to hear your thoughts, Nick, if you don't mind, on the UN's recent self-assessment and the suggestions within it, notably of a special UN representative for Afghanistan, as well as a consensual constitution. What likelihood for either of these two suggestions to see the light of day?
Thank you very much indeed. And first of all, obviously, thank you to the organisers. Everybody's thanked them. People who haven't been thanked yet are the interpreters. And I think they've been doing a really great job this year and working very, very hard. So my thanks to the interpreters. They can interpret that to themselves in Dari. The General has, of course, been sober, frank, realistic, and I feel the sort of energy level of the room may have gone down somewhat as we're confronted with a rather bleak assessment. But as he says, that is the role of intelligence agencies, to be hard-nosed and as factual as possible. My experience, I guess, as a diplomat is that slightly like Ambassador Said Jawad, that we always try to look for opportunities, and the truth often lies somewhere in between. It's often not quite as bleak or as unpromising as our intelligence colleagues might point out, but at the same time, it's a very, very useful corrective as well. I should begin with a public health warning. I am retired, so I speak of only my own views and not at all of the government views. So you have no reason to listen to me, because the second health warning as well is that I am often wrong. And I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or not, but in Afghanistan, I have made many, many mistakes, and I have said things which turned out not to be true. I have said to Afghan colleagues when I was NATO ambassador, we shall not leave you. We shall not abandon you. We shall not walk away. We did. I've said to NATO allies, we are all in together and we will stay until the mission is completed. And we didn't. So I have a history of getting things wrong. So use that filter when listening to me now. I will give just a couple of bits of advice. I think if I were a diplomat, a government servant now, what policy advice would I be giving to the government, to international community partners, not to Afghans? I think Afghans have suffered enough from foreigners giving advice, foreigners interfering. Reminds me of Ronald Reagan's expression once when he was advocating for a very small role for the state. And he said that for the business community in America, the 9 most frightening words are, I am from the government and I am here to help you. I think probably for Afghans, some of the 9 most frightening words could be, I am a foreign diplomat and I am here to help you. So let me confine my advice to international community partners. First, I would say is, please focus more on accountability. And that, we heard yesterday, really depends on pushing much harder on the question of human rights and crimes against humanity. And I would be advising all partners, as we heard from Alisa Yamamoto yesterday, to support the draft treaty for crimes against humanity, including reference to gender apartheid. Why is this important? Well, first, obviously, because it's right. It is absolutely right. Secondly, there is, amongst the international community, a very strong consensus on this. This is arguing for something which no nation, no state is arguing against, whether it be a Muslim state, other states. Support for women's rights and human rights and against crimes against humanity is strong. And thirdly, the reason is it may close off, as we heard yesterday as well, the legal route to recognition of the Taliban government, because if they are committers of crimes against humanity and that treaty has been signed, states parties will not be able to formally recognize. So I think those first advice. Second advice, I would say, is put more effort into supporting Afghan opposition and civil society. We've heard a lot about this, and I've heard in every conversation I have in the corridor. How can the international community help Afghans come together more around a political agenda for the next Afghanistan? And I agree, more needs to be done. I think, what has been achieved so far in 2 years and 3 months is beginning to be impressive. There is a large amount of momentum, a large amount of air miles, whether it's Tehran, Moscow, Halifax, Kazan, Dushanbe, Vienna. The air miles are mounting, but it's good. There is beginning to be more, I think, coherence, more shared common vision. I think it's wrong to seek unity. That's never going to happen. Look at the opposition in most countries. In the United Kingdom, for example, there's no united opposition. It's unrealistic to expect complete unity, but I think it is realistic for Afghans to have a common enough vision for the future. And also for Afghans to work very hard in the back rooms on some of the technical issues, because there will be a time when you are confronted with what kind of constitution will you want in the future? What kind of state will it be? Parliamentary, presidential, federal, central, whatever, big question. In the technical back rooms, Afghans can work on that and they can benefit assistance to do that. So I think that's, that would be my 2 bits of advice to international community governments. Let me now comment on the UN assessment by Ambassador Sinir Liolu. This is a very important, I think, very important document that has been produced. Unfortunately, produced in English first, and I think there may be a Dari translation now available, but there certainly isn't a Pashto translation as far as I know. So a little like we heard from Nasreen Gross yesterday, people will be struggling to read it. Many in the room probably haven't actually read the text. You've probably read commentary about it, but I would urge you to actually read the complete text if you can. Which I have. Now, a lot of people have reacted quite negatively to the report, and on my reading, I can understand that. There are some negative, bad things in there, some sort of unfortunate things, but there are also some very good things as well. And I would encourage people to try to focus on the good and the positive aspects of it, because I believe it will become adopted and it will become a guiding framework for the international community and UN Security Council going forward. So, particularly good thing in it, let me emphasize, is the very recommendations that Ambassador Jawad has got as well. It talks about the need for greater international coherence and greater international support for all Afghans, opposition, civil society, and eventually a political process involving the Taliban. And it suggests the appointment of a special envoy. It suggests the formation of a large group and then also a smaller contact group. I think these would be, if the Security Council backs them, all members of it, this would be a very useful way to help bring more coherence to the work that needs to be done. But a word of warning as well. In the assessment, I would say there is a risk that people will read it selectively. There are obviously things they don't like, and they will cherry pick the bits that they do like. And most of all, I would urge people to be very vigilant about the conditionality, because my reading of the text is that there is strong conditionality in there, the conditionality around the Taliban recognizing fully the human rights of women and their wider human rights obligations that they have made internationally, the state of Afghanistan. My reading of it is that that is a condition for the rest, not a condition for setting up special envoy and contact group. That can go ahead without condition, and that should go ahead. But the rest of it, I think, is conditional. There is a danger that if you read the report, because of how it is presented, 1, 2, 3, it may be suggesting a sequence. It suggests that first, there should be more economic development assistance. Second, there should be a sort of normalization of cooperation on counterterrorism, counter-narcotics, connectivity. And then thirdly, there is a roadmap for the political process and engagement. I do not think this is a sequence. I think it should, if it were presented differently, it should have the roadmap as the first thing, because the roadmap very clearly sets out the conditionality in that. Unless the Taliban are able to rise to respect their international human rights obligations, nothing else proceeds. However, the reality is people will pick and choose and justify their actions from different bits of it. And I would urge everybody else to be as vigilant as possible against creeping recognition and creeping normalization, because that at this stage is not merited. So anyway, thank you. There we are. That's it. Let me just finish one quotation. The advantage of attending all these international meetings, as many of you know, is that you get a chance to watch movies on the flights that you wouldn't normally watch. On the way here, I watched Bezos, which is about the phenomenal success story of Jeff Bezos and Amazon. I'm not, the other online retailers are available, and I'm not personally commercially endorsing one or the other, but I was struck by the inspiring success story that it had, and his quotation at the end of how he went from a garage business to being the world's richest man ever in 2021. And his quotation to inspire us all was, let me find it. When it's tough, will you give up? Or will you be relentless? And I know everybody in this room will not give up, and you will continue being relentless, and you deserve support for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Now we all know what to watch on the plane on the way home. Our next panelist is Karina Tamshina. She's with the UN Office of Counterterrorism based in Ashgabat in Turkmenistan, so she knows the region very well. Karina, we don't have a lot of time, and I really do want to get to some questions. We're running very tight, so when I see people get up and leave for lunch, then we'll stop. But if you want to stick around and ask some questions of the panelists and keep the conversation going for a little while longer, please feel free to. We'll just get Karina's assessment of the terrorism picture that is her expertise of the region, and we'll bounce it off, Afghanistan having become jihad central for the world and inspiration for groups across the world who we are now seeing being very active. And then we will come to questions. So I would ask also that you try and get my attention, and then we'll ask some questions when we've heard from Karina. Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleagues. First of all, of course, I would like to thank our dear organizers, the Afghan Institute for Strategic Studies. I would like to thank as well our host country, the Republic of Tajikistan, for hosting us today. As a part of UN family, of course, I'm glad to see our colleagues from UNODC and the experts from the monitoring team to give their presentations. But as well, I'm a little bit sad for not seeing our colleagues from the United Nations mission, assistance mission in Afghanistan. I think yesterday and today you raised a number of important questions that it would be definitely able to address. As you see in my title, I'm a regional coordination officer for Central Asia, especially, and I will speak regarding this regional consensus from a Central Asian perspective. And as of today, we can see that Central Asians member states, they share a number of challenges and threats, and we see a strong political will to have a joint approach in countering terrorism and prevention of violent extremism. Already in 2011, all 5 Central Asian states adopted their joint regional strategy, the joint plan of action for the implementation of the United Nations global counterterrorism strategy in Central Asia. And we're glad to see that in 2022 in Tashkent, in Uzbekistan, all 5 Central member states met again to adopt an updated version of this joint plan of action that was supported by the UN Regional Center for Preventive Diplomacy and the United Nations Center of Counterterrorism. The Joint Plan of Action since 2011 mentions the need to contribute to stabilization in Afghanistan and promote peace-building efforts as a critical factor in regional stability and in preventing the spread of terrorism. It also mentions the need to enhance the cooperation and coordination among law enforcement agencies, including through increased sharing of data across the region. All this, of course, while promoting human rights and the rule of law. As I'm covering mostly the Central Asian region, I want to emphasize that the situation in Afghanistan continues to have an impact on security in the region. According to various sources mentioned yesterday and today, we have a number of terrorist and extremist groups still remaining on the territory of Afghanistan, in which individual citizens of Central Asia are also involved. And of course, the situation on the border remains tense. And given the importance of this Afghan factor, the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism, together with the United Nations Regional Center for Preventive Diplomacy for Central Asia, are supporting Central Asian member states in developing a counterterrorism early warning network for Central Asia, especially to address counterterrorism threats and sometimes the challenges evolving from the situation in Afghanistan. There are several goals for this counterterrorism early warning network. Of course, is to intensify and to systematize the information exchange between regional and national law enforcement agents, but as well with UN agencies, experts, and regional and international organizations. Most of you might mention that we have already a number of organizations, structures, and platforms for this kind of cooperation. And it's true, we have the regional anti-terrorist structure of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, collective security treaty organizations, Commonwealth of Independent States, Anti-Terrorism Center, Deputy Foreign Ministers meeting of Central Asia that is currently taking place in Bishkek, where colleagues from Central Asia are discussing counterterrorism, prevention of violent extremism, and various security-related matters, and many others. But I have, of course, a few comments in that regard. Of course, most of the platforms that previously involved Afghanistan for obvious reasons cannot work for now with this with Afghanistan and de facto authorities. But there is still a need to somehow build this connection. There are no regular platform involving UN agencies working on security, counterterrorism, prevention of violent extremism or related issues at the regional level. to discuss and address the impact of the evolving situation in Afghanistan to Central Asia. As we cannot engage with Afghanistan de facto authorities directly, I think we need to further enhance our cooperation with the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan. And of course, we see the space for improvement, for further involvement of civil society organizations in Central Asia, as most of them are directly in contact, for example, with Afghan refugees in Central Asia or with Afghan students, and they know their challenges in Central Asia. They are very often the first to address and to analyze the threats of radicalization.
Excuse me, Karina,
My
can I
last
interrupt
point?
you?
Yes, my last paragraph.
I do want to take some questions if anybody has some questions. Yes, there's hands going up. So
Okay.
do you mind
My
if
last
people come back
paragraph,
to you with
1 minute.
questions on that?
1 minute, thank you.
Terrific, thank you.
So, and in
Please.
general, we see the clear
we're
interest
doing
from
this
Central Asian experts to engage more with the experts from Afghanistan on a number of elements in prevention of violent extremism and in counterterrorism. In addition to intelligence information like cybersecurity, countering the finance of terrorism, border control, drug trafficking, and so on. We have a lot of questions to Afghan experts on religious education, women issue, youth issue, propaganda online, the issue of repatriations and foreign terrorist fighters, and many others. And I'm glad to see that during this Herat security dialogue, we had experts from Kyrgyzstan and from Tajikistan, but I'm sure that we have more experts from Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan that would be happy to build their connections with you on these issues and to share their expertise with you. So we're looking forward to build this kind of platforms with our colleagues. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you identify yourself and then ask the question?
تشکر. تاریسا محمدی هستم. سپانتا صاحب در
And
میدان آمد
please,
ما هم در میدان
we
می.
don't have a lot of time, so if you just ask a
Okay.
question rather than make a
Okay.
speech, that'd be great.
اوکی. ما در لپتاپ خود فقط می خواهیم یک چیز را نشان بدم با آقای اسد درانی. از دیروز تا بال ما می بینیم که بیشتر و زیادتر مجلس دیروز و امروز علمی و سیاسی است و ما چون از کشور جهان سوم هستیم، در بین ما خوبترین سیاستمدار کسی است که فقط به مردم عوام خود بهتر و خوبتر فریب داده بتانه. معذرت میخوایم و سیاستمدار کن از بین مردم میخوایم مگب بزنم. در اینجا 3 نکته ما پیش خود یادداشت کردم. یکی خانم میتال درباره مواد مخدر و مواد شیمیایی گفتن که چگونه در این مناطق تا بالا میشه و آقای ولادیمیر اسف اینا هم درباره رادیکالیزم گپ زدن که تاجیکان تاجیکستان و تاجیکان افغانستان فرق ای داره که اونا نسبتا رادیکال هستن و اینجا نیستن. و آقای اسد درانی گفتن بعد از اینکه روسیه از افغانستان اخراج شد ما فکر میکردیم که وضعیت در اونجا خوبتر و بهتر میشود. ما با آقای اسد درانی یک کتاب است که شاید حتما مطالعه کرده باشند. این کتاب است The Fourth World War Diplomacy and Espionage in the Age of Terrorism. در این کتاب رئیس امنیتی یا استخبارات فرانسه می نویسه که ما یک پلان جور کردیم که افراطیت را در خط دیورن ای طرف و ای طرف چگونه ما مروج بسازیم، مواد مخدر را ما چگونه در اینجا کشت و ضرب بکنیم، چگونه میگه ما رفتیم با ریگن صحبت کردیم و توافق
مساخیل صاحب کتاب میشه که ما رفرنس گرفتیم خودمون مطالعه کنیم.
نه ما یک
سوالتان پرسان
خب میایم سر سوال میگه ما از سال 1983 تا سال 1989 با رئیس ISI جنرال
do you have a question? It's not a platform.
میم سوال میم. فقط یک دقیقه. شما قدر صحبت کردین بگذارین که از قلب ملت یک کسی آمده ما هم صحبت کنیم. با رئیس ISI جنرال اختر عبدالرحمن، بعد از او با جنرال حمید گل و بعد از او با جنرال شمس الرحمن کالو و بعد از او با جنرال اسد درانی میگه ما این برنامه ها را پیش بردیم، به اینا ما چک سفید دادیم. سوال ما ای است آقای اسد درانی، شما که گفتین ما فکر میکردیم بعد از اخراج روسیه در اینجا اوضاع خوبتر میشه، شما که چک سفید گرفتین و 20,000 مدرسه مذهبی را در اونجا تاسیس کردین و جور کردین و ما شاهدش بودیم، مد او سال اگر ما بگوییم که ما فکر میکردم خوبتر میشه و نمیفهمم که در او وقت یک طفل 9 ساله یا 10 ساله بودم، شما که رئیس ISI پاکستان بودیم، شما آیا ای را فکر نمیکردین که 20,000 امروز این وضعیتی که فعلا در افغانستان است این وضعیت را به بار میاره؟ تشکر.
Let's have a question now, can we please? Yeah. One moment.
You know, just describe the gist of the question.
General Durrani, what we're going to do is take some questions.
What's the question?
We'll take some questions first.
I think let's close.
No, we'll have one more question. Oh, excuse me. Before we come to you, let's go to the ambassador for Poland. And please don't make a speech. Ask a question of one of our distinguished panelists.
تشکر. سوال ما از سفیر صاحب جواد است. شما در مورد از اینکه غیر ممکن صحبت کردین، فعلا غیر ممکن شده. یک گروه نظامی با تجربه تروریستی جغرافیایی را به نام افغانستان کنترل میکنه. چی فکر میکنین با وجودی که یک زون تجارتی شده و فعلا کشورهای منطقه منفعتشان میبرن، مردم افغانستان مبارزهشان چگونه آغاز کنن که در منطقه و جهان شنونده داشته باشن؟
Let's have Shanti down the back there. Yes. And please introduce yourself, Shanti.
Thank you. I'm Shanti D'Souza. I'm a founder and president of an independent research forum called Mantra in India. Very interesting panel. And since we're looking at regional consensus and global support, I have 3 specific questions to 3 panelists to keep it brief.
Very brief. If you don't
Very
mind.
brief.
Thank you.
Ambassador Jawad, and since you talked about the regional consensus, I would like to know a little bit more about what intra-Afghan consensus is, because only based on that you can have a regional consensus. It'll be very important to know what Afghans look at in terms of regional consensus. The second question is to General Durrani, since you have a very long association with Afghanistan and especially with the Taliban. What you're facing in Pakistan now is kind of a classic blowback. But my question fundamentally is, what are you doing in terms of having an inclusive government in Afghanistan? How do you see peace and stability returning to Afghanistan? And does it really help to send back refugees from Afghanistan back to that country in this point of time? And the last question is, Sir Nikke, I would just like to know, in terms of roadmap we are talking about, you gave about a lot about the public health warning and all of that. But my real question is, did you really have a roadmap during the intervention in Afghanistan? And if you didn't have, do you have one now? Thank you.
Thank you, Shanti. One more before you. Aparna Rai, Indian journalist.
Hi, I'm the Asia correspondent from The Independent. On the topic of recognition and global support, what is the international community's breaking point to pull up the Taliban? And why is it not keeping schools shut, public executions, and the regime's inability to keep the population alive?
And one more in the front row here.
سلام، و یک یادآوری و تذکر و سوال داشتم از ولادیمیر افسیب. شما گفتین که مخالفین طالبان نمیتونن که طالبان از عرصه سیاسی و حاکمیت خارج بسازن. من فکر میکنم که شما به جای ما ملاها از غیب خبر دادین و ظاهرا فرشته‌هایی به شما گفتن که در آینده اتفاق نمیفته.
اما ترجمه رو بهش بده، مترجم رو اما ترنسلیشن رو بهش فارغ کنید که بشنوه. به فارسی ما فارسی که بزنم. کانال 1 من چون بهشون ترجمه نشدم من تکرار میکنم. جناب آقای سوال میکنم چشم اجازه بدین؟ نه میشنم ان شاء الله. آقای ولادیمیر شما گفتین که مخالفای طالبان نمیتونن پیروز شوند و نظام آپارتاید حاکم در افغانستان تغییر بدن. من یک سوال دارم و
Can you hear now? Can you hear it? Are you getting the translation?
چشم خب.
Can you listen to his question? Okay. You can.
خب بعض وقتا مصلحت بر نشنیدن است خلاصه.
We'll get a translation for you. sir.
رسالت هم کمتر میکنه. من باورم است که تحلیل سیاسی باید مبتنی بر پایه‌های فلسفی سیاسی باشه. من در شهر دوشنبه یک جمله رو به ایشان میگم از زبان ابن سینا بنیانگذار فلسفی سینوی. ایشان میگه کل ما قرع سمعک من العجائب فذره فی بقعة الامکان. هر چیزی که عجیبی شنیدی او رو احتمالش بده بگو که ممکن هست. و ما ملت افغانستان چون ملت هستیم که یک ویژگی ما در توانستن است. ما میتونیم که بر آپارتاید و فاشیسم فائق بیاییم. سوالی که مشخصا من از آقای ولادیمیر دارم است که ببینین آیا مبارزه با تروریسم، مبارزه با آپارتاید، مبارزه با نازیسم، مبارزه با فاشیسم یک رسالت، یک مأموریت جهانی هست یا خیر؟ یا استاندارد دوگانه داریم؟ شما فراموش نکنین که وقتی وارد اوکراین شدین گفتین ما به خاطر ای که اوکراینی ها نازیسم جدید را بنیانگذاری کردن و روس زبان ها را و زبان روسی را و هویت روسی را در خطر قرار دادن، ما اونجا بر دفاع از هویت و زبان روسی در برابر آپارتاید زلنسکی و یارانش حرکت کردین. شما از این سنگین را بر ملت روسیه تحمیل کردین ولی قبول کردین برای مبارزه با نازیسم. ملت افغانستان هم این هزینه را میپردازن که تا آپارتاید را، فاشیسم را، نازیسم را، زن ستیزی را، شیعه ستیزی را و فارسی ستیزی را باش مبارزه کنن و قطعا هزینه کمتره که شما در اوکراین متحمل شدین ما در افغانستان با اجماع ملی و خرد انسان‌های افغانستان بهش پیروز میشیم. همین جواب مرا بدین.
You got that. Okay. Well, let's have very brief answers, if you don't mind, one each of you, because we're already running late. People are getting angry. So, do you want to go first, Ambassador Jawad?
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief and concise to the two questions on the issue of the what kind of resistance. But فارسی میگم به شما بخشید برای شما سوال با فارسی پرسیده بودین. در مورد سوال شما بانوی گرامی در مورد از اینکه چین و مبارزه را مردم افغانستان آغاز کردن یا چی مبارزه را داشته باشن، اول خو باید یادآوری کنیم از مبارزه حکومت زنای افغانستان و از نوجوانی مردای افغانستان که در پلیس استاد نشدن. دی جای شک نیست. و دوم مسئله است که توصیه از اینکه چین و مبارزه را افغان ها داشته باشن یا نداشته باشن که ما دوستای بین‌المللی میشنویم ناموجه است. وقتی که طرف مقابل و درخواست تماس و دوستی و تغییر جواب نمیده، مردم افغانستان حق دارن هر شیوه مبارزه را که برای بهبود آینده خود انتخاب میکنن حق مسلم و طبیعیشان است. ما چون وقت کم است در مورد the second question on the issue of the intra-Afghan consensus, Shanti, thank you for asking this really good questions. The Afghan knows what they don't want. There is a complete consensus of what the Afghan don't want. And it's not the existing setup, where it's gender apartheid, where it's discrimination against both Afghan citizens. And now what the Afghan wants, the Afghan have the rights to have different things. We are a diverse nation. That's the beauty of our country. We don't have to have one solution for an alternative. We don't need to have this. The Taliban are providing one solution for all Afghans. the Afghan nation is a very diverse nation, different ethnicity, different age group, genders, ethnicity, and every Afghan citizen has the rights to have actually an idea about the future of the country, to expect and demand that the Afghans should have a very unified position before actually they're taking seriously an engagement with Taliban is again unrealistic, unfair. There, as Ambassador K indicated, that the opposition in many parts of the world actually is a big spectrum of political direction. So therefore, we know what we don't want, and as far as what we want, we have the right to have different options in different positions for the future of the country. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to end it there. And if you have any questions of any of the panelists, you can find them, hunt them down, and ask those questions directly. But for now, thank you very much for participating and listening and being such a good audience. And I hope you got something out of it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. تشکر فراوان از پنلست‌های محترم. بریک نداریم. پنل دیگه شروع میشه. بسیار میبخشیم. پنل بعدی رو شروع میکنیم. پنل بعدی ما موضوعش از گفتگوی ملی. از یک از موضوع مهمتر گفتگوی ملی به سوی افغانستان دموکراتیک.
من اون خوردن ندارم. چی کنم؟
خب هر روز ما با سختی هست.
مخاطبان روزنامه 8 صبح می توانند خبرهای افغانستان و جهان را از دامنه اینترنتی این روزنامه دریافت کنند. همچنان آدرس های روزنامه 8 صبح در فیسبوک، اینستاگرام، توییتر، یوتیوب، اسپاتیفای، اپل میوزیک، گوگل پادکست و تریدز، خبرهای تازه، گزارش‌های ویژه، مستندهای کوتاه و تحلیل‌ها را در قالب پادکست و مخاطبان ارائه می‌کند. رویدادها بر سرنوشت شما تأثیر می‌گذارند. آنچه را می‌بینید و آنچه را می‌دانید روایت کنید. 8 صبح، روایت دیروز، آینه امروز، نوید فردا.
د 8 صبح ټلګرام چینل وڅارئ. موږ د افغانستان، سیمې او نړۍ وروستي خبرونه معتبر، متوازن او پر وخت خبرو. د خبري پیښو، راپورونو او تحلیلونو ته د اسانه لاسرسي لپاره د 8 صبح ټلګرام چینل وڅارئ او خپور کړئ.
من اون خوردن ندارم.
هشت صبح، دریچه خبر افغانستان.